Happy to have David Glover here, the Bartlett Bee Whisperer, to teach us all about how to help out the honeybees in our community and a little bit about what he does. And we will, of course, have plenty of time for question and answers and conversation. Mr. Glover has been working with honeybees since 2009. He has been using that as a way to both help out local home and business owners, and he also uses those bees that he gathers to set up his own hives. He removes hives from areas, businesses, and homes about 200 times a year. There's about 40,000 bees in each of those hives, in each colony. And he and his home currently has over 100 hives in his personal apiary. So he has a lot of experience with bees. He's a master beekeeper. He's a member of the Memphis Area Beekeepers Association and the Tennessee Beekeepers Association. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the program over to him. If you guys have questions, if you'll just raise your hand or type in the chat box, and we'll get those to Mr. Glover.
Thank you. And just for a side note, this October, I will be speaking at the Tennessee Beekeepers Association in their annual conference. So they've asked me to come to, I don't know if we're in Chattanooga or where we are this year, but I get to go do that too. So this is fun. I'm going to go ahead and get my PowerPoint presentation up. And because we're so few, unless we get really huge in, if y'all have questions along the way that are dealing with what I'm talking about, then we will, okay, escape. Did that the wrong way. So that's me. The MBA is actually a master's in business administration. My wife is my office manager, and she's also my boss in so many ways. And she said that people need to know that you're not just some farm boy playing with bees. They need to know that you do have a master's in from college. Not only do you do bees, but you actually understand business and how things work. I like the term bee whisperer because, and a lot of times that's what I do. Most people talk to their dogs and expect them to talk back, and they make their noises, and we emote with our animals. Well, I find it very calming when I talk to the bees, and when I teach others to talk to their bees, they themselves calm down. And as they're calmed, they're able to work with their bees, and their bees are calmer around them because they are emoting calmness. We have pheromones that we release, and as humans, we generally don't smell them, but animals do. And when we're afraid, the bees can smell that fear. So the calmer you are when you're playing with your bees, the better. So bee whispering is a pretty good thing to do. I'm also a bee catcher. I literally can catch bees with my hands and play with them and not be stung. But being stung, with all the thousands of bees I work with during the week, the odds are I will be stung at least once during the week. This last week was 2, 4, 9, 11 times. Not a good week. But when you're talking about millions of bees and the time I work with bees, that's not bad at all. I'm a hive inspector for the state of Tennessee. So for West Tennessee, if people have bees they have diseases or problems with, I can go in and I inspect the hives and see what's going on with them and make recommendations on how to help them. And I am a wrangler. I go get bees from wherever they are to put into my hives, into the hives of friends who've lost colonies, and into the hives of nonprofits that I support. We've been working with honeybees for thousands of years, and one of the oldest representations of this is from Las Cuevas de la Araña in Valencia, Spain, or Valencia as they would say it. This is a cave drawing of a honey gatherer. It's got a rope ladder going down the side of a cliff. He's reaching into a small alcove to pull out honey. And if the picture really depicts what is going on, those are some pretty big bees attacking the guy. I'm not sure, but for the adults in the house, the last paragraph says the figure is naked. with no protection from stings. And all I can say is that's got to be a guy, because I cannot see a woman ever going against stinging anything and not protecting herself. He's probably on a dare from an older brother who I dare you to go down there and get him. Yeah, I dare you to do it naked. So I can see brothers doing it. I got 6 brothers, so I never did that, but we did do some stupid stuff growing up, and we lived to tell the tale, so that's always impressive. We still open cavities to get bees out. This is the first colony that I did that went viral on the internet. It was a house in Germantown, and for some reason or other, the world liked it and had thousands of views within hours of posting. And my YouTube post had 500,000 views in 2 weeks. So it's not shabby for my first video on YouTube. My kids pushed me to go on there. It's amazing, as I've done this bee thing, how many ideas other people have had about my business and what I do, and how it's pushed my business into different venues and to different ways of monetizing what I do with honeybees. I originally started out as wanting to have bees as a hobby, and the next thing I know, it grew into a removal business. But we still go and we get bees out of caves, caverns, trees, houses, just like the honey gatherers thousands of years ago. Now, these are my bees. Most people know that there is a queen bee and there's honeybees, but they don't really understand the differences in all of those bees in the hive. So the picture on the left with that bright orange long bee that looks like a wasp, that's actually a queen bee. And she's easier to tell from all the other bees. If you look at the ones around her, these are all her daughters. They're striped, they're black and white, black and brown, black and tan, black and anything but black and yellow. So there's a clue. If you ever see black and yellow and it's flying at you, it's not a honeybee. It could be a bumblebee, it could be a carpenter bee, or more likely would be a yellow jacket. So most people who get stung by bees aren't stung by honeybees. In the stinging world, the honeybees are the least offensive. In fact, they only sting defensively. You have to do something to cause that bee to sting you. And I, as a child, did that a lot. I walked around barefoot outside and we had clover. So most of the stings I got as a child were in my feet. So there's the queen and the worker bees. And this big boy on my finger on the right, that's a drone. About 10% of the hive during spring and summer is made up of boys. And they've only got one purpose in life, and that purpose is to mate with a new queen. And most of us are familiar with where babies come from, and the mating has to happen for a new baby to happen. With honeybees, it's a little bit different. The queen bee is mated in one period of time, and she stores all the genetic material that she receives in that mating and keeps it viable inside her body for up to 5 years. So as she lays an egg, if she's going to be laying a daughter, she will lay a fertilized egg. And that will go into a small cell, and that will become a worker bee or a queen. If she decides that that cell is larger and she wants to lay a boy egg, she lays an unfertilized egg. The insect world, with the bees specifically, are haploid and diploid, meaning haploid, half the chromosomes, and diploid, meaning both sets of chromosomes. If you have both sets of chromosomes, you're a worker bee or a queen. If you have half the chromosomes, you're a boy. And the difference between the worker bees and the queen actually happens within 3 days of that egg being laid. The worker bees, from day 3 until they die, will eat pollen and honey. The queen only eats royal jelly from the time she's a larva until the day she dies. And that causes a shift in her body that energizes the ovarioles, which is basically stringed ovaries. And she has thousands of them that kick into gear because of that royal jelly. It makes her a fertile female. She grows faster, she grows larger, she grows longer, and she is fertile. The worker bees are not fertile. They are girls just like she is. And along with talking about the differences between boys and girls, the drones don't have stingers. The girls, that's the workers and the queens, do have stingers. The stinger is a modified ovipositor, which is an egg-laying instrument, and they have stingers. When a worker bee stings, she loses her stinger, she dies. When the queen stings, she does not die. Her stinger is built more like it's cylindrical. It's more like a wasp stinger. Like wasp can sting multiple times, so can the queen. The worker bees, their stinger is barbed. But once again, they only sting defensively. The queen stings offensively, not to people, but when she first emerges from her cell as a new queen, she goes around the hive and finds her sister queens that are still growing, and she stings them through the wax because there can only be one queen. These are not honeybees. These are bees familiar to Tennessee. In the upper left, we have the paper wasp. Below that is the yellow jacket. To the right is the red wasp and the paper wasp. And far right is a larger group of yellow jackets. Sorry about that. Everything in the upper left quadrant are in the wasp family, paper wasp and red wasp. And in the right side is yellow jackets. In the bottom left, the black and white ones are the ball-faced hornets. They're not a true hornet, but we call them that anyway. And the one to the right bottom is the European hornet, and it is a true hornet. They are all in the wasp families. They're all vespids, and they're more related to ants than they are to honeybees. If you ever get stung by one of these, it's going to hurt, and they can sting you multiple times. So part of the reason why we're talking today is discuss why the bees are important to us. I don't know about you, but I like to eat. 1/3 of what we eat comes to us because honeybees did their job. The worker bees, in the last 3 weeks of their lives, go from being house bees to being foragers. They go out to the field, they gather pollen, they gather nectar, they gather water, and they also gather tree saps to make propolis. Propolis is like the glue that holds the hive together, but it's also the pharmaceuticals for the hive. It's antibacterial, antibiotic, antifungal, and so it helps keep disease out of the hives. But these bees are out there foraging, and as they're doing that, digging around in the flowers, pollen gets stuck to the tiny little hairs on their bodies. And when they go to the next flower, that pollen is transferred, which causes pollination. And pollination is how plants reproduce. It causes the seeds inside the flowers to start growing. And if that is a fruiting flower, then it causes the flesh around the fruit to grow. So if you like apples, and I like apples, you've got to have the pollination for those to happen, because apples, unlike some of our flowers, actually have to be pollinated, cross-pollinated from another tree. And not only from another tree, but from a different species of tree. If you like squash, watermelons, cucumbers, those are kind of funny in that they have a male flower that has a lot of pollen and a whole bunch of female flowers down the vine that don't have the pollen. And so the pollen has to be transferred from the male flower to the female flowers for that squash to grow. That 1/3 happens because the bees are doing their job, foraging and bringing food back to their hive. These bees, covered in all that yellow pollen, are actually in the bottom or the base of a male squash flower. Now, this is kind of important in the United States. We used to be like the technological giant in the world, but we're also a breadbasket for the world. In the United States, because of pollination, because of the migratory beekeepers who are shipping bees across the United States year-round, that adds about $29 billion annually to our agriculture. That's food that we can sell. That's out there. In the state of Tennessee, it increases it by 300 million annually. In thinking about that, how many colonies do you think you would need to have for your fields to be pollinated? If you had 1, 2, 3 acres of land, a colony would be fine because bees forage up to 2 miles away from your home. But according to state statistics, we would need to have 421,000 colonies or 10 colonies per square acre to provide optimal coverage and pollination of our crops. Most of those are provided by hobbyist beekeepers. Problem is, we've only got about 37,000 registered hives in Tennessee. If we're looking for 421,000 colonies, we're way short. And this is optimal. To have the minimum number of honeybees for the required pollination in Tennessee, that would be, it's a smaller number, 84,000 colonies. So that's 2 colonies per square mile. That's kind of crazy. I have a lot of my hives over at Jones Orchard, and they love having my bees there because it increases their output on all of their crops, and averages it for crops across the United States. They increase the output or the yield by at least a third. So that's a lot of food. But once again, we've only got 37,000 registered hives. So this is a picture from Whole Foods. Talk about food. This is what it would look like if the bees were in and working for us. And it looks like they're doing a pretty good job. This is what it would look like without the pollination bees. There's a lot less food, but there's still food. So regardless of what people say on the internet, Einstein never said anything about when the bees die, man will die within 4 years. Didn't happen. He was a mathematician. He wasn't an entomologist. He never said it. But we will lose variety in our diets. If you like strawberries, well, you're going to lose your strawberries if we don't have honeybees. If you like, I don't know, avocados, if you like almonds, without honeybees, we would lose those nuts and those fruits. I guess an avocado is a berry because it has a single seed per flower. Here are 21 crops that we would lose without our honeybees. The first one, and it's probably one of the most productive in the United States, is almonds. 80% of the world's almond supply comes from California, and over 2/3 of our colonies go to California in February and March every year just to pollinate those thousands of acres of almonds. And that's a lot. Apples. Washington produces about 3 out of every 5 apples that are eaten in the United States. We would lose apples. We'd also lose avocados, blackberries, cantaloupe, blueberries, cherries, cranberries, cucumbers, onions. Don't think about that, but onions are pollinated also. You can graft off of onions and have your own, but they do go to seed and they do have flowers on top. Oranges, grapefruit, peaches, pears, plums, pumpkins, rapeseed, raspberries, squash, strawberries, and my favorite, watermelon. So once again, when the flower gets pollinated, it causes the germination of seeds inside the flower. And with the seedless watermelons, there is a vestigial seed in there that starts germinating and growing. And as the fruit around the seed starts to grow, the seedless vestigial seed goes away. But yeah, we'd lose watermelons. One of the reasons you're probably here is because you've heard that our bees are dying. And they are. We do have problems with them. By the way, people are dying too. I don't know if you knew that. That's part of mortality and part of life, that if you're born, you're going to die. It's going to happen. What we have concerns about is when those deaths happen unnaturally. In the late 70s, 80s, we came up with a disease, a problem in our bees called colony collapse disorder. And we've been studying it for a long time. And we finally have a trigger of what caused it. But this is this is my favorite depiction of colony collapse disorder. It was cover art for an American Bee Journal. And it has every explanation that the artist could come up with of why the bees were dying. We've got crop dusters out there killing our bees. We've got Nukem Pesticide Company bellowing through chemistry. We've got the beekeeper who's got problems with his truck and he has a wreck on the highway and loses his bees. We've got, Emily, are you a Doctor Who fan?
Sure am.
Okay, over here on the left, we have a spaceship. And in one of the episodes of Doctor Who, he casually mentioned that the bees were done studying us and they were going back home. So there's a lot of things. Some people say that God is mad at us and he is casting his bolts at our bees to get rid of our bees, to slowly kill us and make us repent. I don't believe God works that way, but that's neither here nor there. High wires, the electricity going everywhere, and the cell towers interfering with bees' ability to navigate. I've got beekeeper friends who have bees under the TVA lines and have absolutely the best honey I've come across. Their bees aren't having problems. And down here towards the bottom, you got this beekeeper who's just opened up his hive, and it's got this looks like an alien space sucker, if you've watched the Alien movies. That's actually a bad depiction of varroa mite, but yeah, any number of things. And you got to have a politician in there somewhere. And if you're in Tennessee, you got to have a dead skunk on the road. So these are all the different things that people think are actually killing our bees. And the number one that everybody seems to jump on is pesticides. Now, it's not always the chemicals. In 2012, APHIS, Animal Plant Health Inspection Services, studied wax because we're trying to figure out what's going on with colony collapse disorder, and we couldn't find the dead bees to study. Well, wax is very absorbent. Anything the bees have touched gets absorbed into the wax. And so across the United States, we had wax collections and sent them to APHIS to be studied. And they found that 42% of the chemicals that were found in the beehive were actually beekeeper originated. They were miticides and pesticides, things that the beekeepers were using to try to control varroa mite. And the one pesticide that everyone seems to blame are called neonicotinoids, or neonics for short. Only 3% of the pesticides in the hives were neonics. So they get a bad rap. And with agriculture, we've moved to grams per acre of pesticide versus pounds per acre with going to neonicotinoids. This is from, again, American Bee Journal 2016 also. So let's talk about the neonics. Everybody says stop using because they're killing our bees. This came about in the 90s. So everyone has an opinion about them. Farmers love them because they can use less pesticide to control pests in their fields. And a lot of the green side of the world hates them because it kills everything. They call it a systemic pesticide, and it is. It goes in through the roots and comes in through the plant. And anything that eats the plant is going to get the pesticide. So generally the pest that would be chewing down your plants that you're growing in your field would be killed by the pesticide. And these are the names that they're sold under. One of the most common is imidacloprid. So where did it start? It started in France. In 1994, 1998, France suffered a huge loss of honeybees. And when they did their initial studies, they found that the neonicotinoids were what was killing the bees. And they've got them banned all across Europe. I've always had a problem with that. And I wasn't supported in it until 2018 when a follow-up study was done. When pesticides are applied in agriculture, they usually have adjuvants, things that are added to the pesticides to help them work better. In surgery, if you go to sleep and you're having surgery, they give you a gas that knocks you out. The adjutant is most often nitrous oxide because it will double the dose without having to double the dose of the medicine that's given to you to knock you out. By the way, I worked in surgery for 10 years, so that I do understand. What they found in that second study was something called fipronil as an adjutant. Fipronil is most commonly used here in the United States and in our communities as a flea and tick killer with our dogs and cats. We're using this stuff. The problem of it is it kills honeybees, not the neonicotinoids. Neonicotinoids get into a bee system, and the bee basically gets drunk, and they can't navigate for a little while, just like somebody who drank too much on a Friday night and tried to drive home. They don't make it back, but once they sober up, they're able to fly home. Also, when honeybees approach their own hive, if they are sickly or drunk, the guard bees won't let them into the hive, so those drunk bees can't come in and cause problems. What they learned about fipronil was that fipronil actually bioaccumulates inside the body of the honeybee. What that means in layman's term is drinking one beer, and over a period of a day, 2 days, the alcohol bioaccumulating and growing greater into our bodies to the point that we die of alcohol poisoning from just one beer. Fipronil does that with honeybees. It gets into the bee's system and it starts building, and the bees die. So, not the neonicotinoids. So, put it in real world. I've got crepe myrtles and I've got crepe myrtle scale. What do I need to do to help my crepe myrtles? Well, according to the Ag Department, Tennessee EDU, you need to take fertilizer. This is what you do. Blah, 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 blah. Imidacloprid. It's a drench. You put it on the ground before your plant starts growing, before the leaves start coming out, and it kills the mites and stuff that cause crepe myrtle scale. And this is where it gets fun. When you do those things, you have to remember one thing, and that is this stuff ends with the word side, like herbicide, pesticide. Whenever I hear those words, I think homicide. Not necessarily killing people, but something is going to die. And when you are using these things that end with side, you need to read the labels. So the EPA has come up with a new label for all pesticides and herbicides, things that are used for killing things. And with this label, there's going to be a special tag on it that has a bee and a red diamond. And this is what we're looking for. When you go to the store to buy things to work in your yard, look at the label. If you see this on there, then it has a pollinator alert. So you're going to read the label, find that, and it will tell you what you need to do to avoid harming honeybees, butterflies, any of our pollinators. That's a big plus because it's very important to us. On the agriculture side of the world, I'd like you to think about money. The farmers are in it to make money, just like all of us. We're working to make money so that we can have the nicer things in life. Sometimes it's just to have a place to live and something to eat. If the farmer puts out too much pesticide into his crops, he's wasted his money. If he doesn't put out enough pesticide, then he ends up losing his crop, and so he's lost money. So this is a financial balance of these things. And so it's very important to look and see who really is putting more pesticides into the ground. And I hate to say it, but it's not the farmers. It's us. We may have a pest in our yard, and we go and we get a bottle of something from one of the stores, and we read the label. It says 1 tablespoon per gallon of water. And we think, gosh, if 1 tablespoon works, 2 tablespoons would be better. What's 3 tablespoons going to hurt? So read the label before you use any pesticides or herbicides in your yard. So We're looking at losses still. In 2014, we had 2.5 million colonies in the United States. And when 2020 happened, amidst all the COVID, we had 2.71 million colonies of bees. We've slowly been increasing the number of our bees in the United States. Now, this is the Bee Informed Partnership. It is a voluntary survey and group where you can take and track all the problems that you have with your bees and other things going on with them. And the big number game in this is how many bees did you lose last year? And it's from the end of April, I mean, 1st of May to the end of April each year. And you count your numbers and you send them in. And these are some pretty high losses. On the minimum, we're about 28% loss, and at the maximum, we're sitting on almost 47% losses of bees. And that's kind of scary. So let's look at where these numbers come from. I pulled these from the Bee Informed Partnership. I'm part of them. In the state of Tennessee in 2016, 2017, we had 5,582 registered beekeepers, and we had 35,000 registered colonies. And during that survey, in the middle, you see the number 66. That's the number of beekeepers who voluntarily provided their losses. So let's look at this again. We got almost 6,000 beekeepers, and less than about 0.1%. Is that right, Emily? About 0.1% filled out the survey. And they had 821 hives. And out of that 821 hives that were held by those 66 beekeepers, they lost 25% of them. I do this survey. So it takes about 45 minutes to do a voluntary survey. And if I have no human nature being what it is, if I'm not experiencing any problems, I'm not going to report them, because I'm not going to take 45 minutes out of my time to waste my time filling out a survey. In 2017 to 2018, we had 80 beekeepers who reported their losses and had 65% loss. 2018 to 19, another 80, we had 45% loss. And in 2019 to 2020, we had 41 beekeepers out of thousands of beekeepers in the state of Tennessee reporting their losses, for a grand total of 43.49% loss. It's kind of crazy. So let's look at these numbers. These are the number of managed honeybee colonies. We've increased them from 2008, and I'm doing the numbers based off of when I became a beekeeper. I started in 2009. So year before, we had 8,000 managed colonies in the state of Tennessee. In 2019, we had 37,000 managed colonies. That is an increase of almost 30,000 managed colonies. We had one dip in 2018, which was considerable. Over 10,000 colonies disappeared. And that's kind of funny because it coincides with the same dip of number of beekeepers in the state who registered their hives that year. So if you had some heavy hitters who had a lot of colonies that didn't report their numbers, then we had the loss. But we picked it back up in 2019 and had 6,800 beekeepers registered. So the numbers don't match what we see on the internet. The internet says that we're losing our bees. They're dying. They're going to go extinct. Real world. This is from realnews.org. We've increased the total population of domesticated bees in the world by 45% since 1961. During that same time period, we increased the need of bees in agriculture by 300%. It's all about money. The more bees we have, the more agriculture we can make, and the more we can sell to the rest of the world. So it's not that we're losing bees, and we are losing about 30% a year, but we're losing income that could have been produced by those bees. So let's go with a national average of 30%. I've got 100 colonies, okay? I lose 30% of them. That leaves me with 70 colonies in the spring. In the spring, I, as a beekeeper, can multiply those hives simply by splitting the hive into 2 separate hives. The old queen will be in one, and as long as I have eggs in the new colony, they will raise a new queen. And by the end of spring, I will have 140 colonies. That's how we're increasing the number of domestically held colonies in the world, by beekeepers managing their hives. You know, think about it in chickens, okay? Every year we lose thousands upon thousands, if not millions of chickens. And we can actually pull those numbers from the NASS report, the National Agriculture Statistics Survey. And it'll tell you the millions of chickens we lose each year. We don't discuss them because those chickens actually become chicken nuggets. They become breast, thighs, chicken soup. We lose a smaller number of cattle, but the same thing is there. And every spring, the cattlemen and the chicken farmers are multiplying their stock so that they can be in production again for the next year. So we've talked about some of the problems that we have with bees. Let me give you the top 2 killers of our bees. Number 1 is not pesticide. This is from the Department of Agriculture and from the University of Georgia, who provided the study. Varroa destructor. That is a mite that gets on our bees, and in fact, there's more than 20 different diseases into the colonies. That mite is bad. It looks that little red freckle on the pupa's abdomen. That's a varroa mite. It bites them and sucks out their fats. And as it does so on the adult bees, it transfers diseases into them, and it can actually kill the colony. Over the years, we had problems figuring out what caused colony collapse disorder because we didn't have dead bees to study. Over a period of time, we started finding them, and we found that there were so many different diseases. Any one of the diseases would be a problem for the hive. It'd be like having strep throat. But strep throat doesn't always kill you. But if you had strep throat and you were dehydrated, you might die. If you had strep throat, were dehydrated, and you weren't able to get food, actually not able to get to the store or to get food that you need or to get the medicine that you need to fight the strep throat, then you would die. So that's a combination of factors that Varroa does. That's how small it is on my finger. It is very hard to see. Number 2 is starvation. The number 2 killer of our bees is starvation. We have flowerless landscapes. We have ornamental only flowers. We have places that nothing is there except grass. Grass is a grain, and the bees don't work with that, so there's no food for them. I don't want to fault anybody who has a green lawn, but when we put the herbicides out there to make them wonderfully green, we're also getting rid of what we would call weeds. Clover, dandelions, that's bee food. And I have clover all in my yard. My neighbors don't like me, but I want my bees to be happy. This is what starvation looks like in a hive. Starvation is when the bees have eaten all of the food in the hive, and that is them actually sucking up the last drops of honey in the bottom of their hives, and they starve that way. Typically, this happens during winter, but it can happen in the spring and summer also. If there's too much rain in spring and they've gone through their winter storage, there's not going to be enough food in there for them to survive spring. Or like this year, we have a late snow, and the snow stays on the ground and the cold stays for over a week. The queens have already started laying their spring eggs, and the bees are nurturing them and caring for them and incubating them and trying to keep them warm. And then we have this cold snap, and they stay on the brood to keep them warm. And they won't break cluster while it's cold to go get food. So if we have an overnight freeze, that's not a problem. But we have an overnight freeze that lasts for a week, that becomes a problem because the bees stay on the brood to keep them warm, and they end up starving themselves to death while they're waiting for the cold to stop. And that's what happened to this hive. We do have a few pesticide kills, and this is what it looks like. The bees are all outside front of the hive. They're dead. Sometimes it happens when the mosquito foggers come through, and the pesticide from the mosquito foggers drifts into the hives. Over the last 4 years, the reported accounts of pesticide kills were not from foggers, and they were not from crop dusters. They were not from farmers who were drifting their pesticide into hives. Each one of the ones that we had over the last 4 years were beekeeper originated. They put something into their hive to control mites or small hive beetles or one of the other pests that we have, and they kill their bees themselves. This pesticide kill that you're looking at right there, the beekeeper did it, not a farmer. So, what can you do to help us with our bees? Well, first thing you can do is plant bee-friendly flowers. If the number 2 killer of our bees is starvation, we can plant things that the bees are going to eat. And the easiest and best things to do are to plant those things that grow naturally where we live. So search out, find natural pollinator friendly plants. You want native versus alien, and vigorous versus invasive. And some of the invasive ones that we can use as examples are kudzu. Yeah, privet, the Bradford pear. I don't know why landscapers use the Bradford pear. It is not wind friendly in the south, and they look ugly when they fall. And when they spawn the next generation of Bradford pear beside them, it has thorns. So, and bees love Bradford pears. I know they do, but we want to get back to nature, back to things that work here. So, instead of planting a butterfly plant, you could have the American boneset, blue false indigo, sweet pepperbush, sweet spire, wild center. These are some of the plants that you can plant. You can have herbs. You can have herbs just for butterflies. If you don't want bees in your backyard, plant for butterflies. If you don't mind the bees in your backyard, these are the herbs that you can do for that. And there are also herbs for hummingbirds. We have trees and shrubs and vines that are bee friendly, and they're easy to plant and they grow well because this is from Tennessee.gov, the Ag Point plants that work in Tennessee. Weeds, chickweed, chicory, dandelion, mullein, ground iving or creeping Charlie, henbit. I have a hard time telling the difference between henbit and chickweed, henbit, and others. But if you look at this pretty pink violet flower, look at the bee. See that orange stripe in between her eyes? That's the pollen from that flower. Pollen comes in many different colors, and it's not always yellow. It's not always the pine green stuff that we get on our cars either, but they will take that also. We have browns, we have almost grays and black pollens also. And then this is me shamelessly begging for your help and support. I am on all of these sites: Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. I'm even on TikTok. My IT guy said, you need to get on TikTok, Dave. And I was like, I am not getting naked and dancing in front of the screen. I am not singing. But you know what? I have sung 2 songs so far on TikTok, but it's my bee stuff. I have some neat videos of things happening in the bee yard or in people's homes when I'm doing removals that I just put out there. So if you want to learn more, you want to see more, follow us on these pages. I don't get paid for this. If you ever see anything that look like the following photos, reach out to me or one of your beekeeping buddies, and we will come get them. I'm 5'6". That is a swarm that is almost 5 feet long hanging from that tree. That's a lot of bees. If you had a second or third extra queen handy, you could set up 3 solid colonies with that one. And I like this one. When I go to schools and talk to kids, I like this. Let's have a seat and talk about bees. And then they look up and they see the picture, and that's a seat covered with bees. I don't want to sit there, Mr. David. No, I don't blame you. But swarms, again, bees sting defensively. If they have nothing to defend, they're not going to sting you unless you squish them. These bees in swarm mode have nothing to defend. So I picked up that chair barehanded, no suit, just me and my t-shirt, blue jeans too, and set it right on top of a hive box, and the bees walked in. Once they went into the hive box, they had something to defend. But on that chair, there was nothing to defend. If you see anything like this on your home or your neighbor's home, tell your neighbor for sure, but give us a call. Odds are bees have moved into your house and they're now subletting without paying rent. This is 3 stories up on someone's attic. And again, bees have moved in. This is ground level. If you have any pipes coming through the side of your house for your cable and your phone line, you want to make sure you stuff that with some screen wire mesh, or steel wool, or some expanding foam, so nothing else will walk into your house. That's a front door for bees. It's a front door for ants, roaches, rats, mice, snakes. Easy access to a nice warm place to live. That was the first colony that I removed from somebody's house back in 2009. We will come get them. We will relocate them. Every bee, every colony that we take out of somebody's house or somebody's business is a colony that we put back into agriculture, either on our farms, the orchard, or one of the farms in Tennessee, where we need these bees working for us. We do not have enough to pollinate all the agriculture that we need out of Tennessee. These bees go back to work feeding us and feeding our kids. And I got this picture because it's pretty cool. This is one of my vacuum buckets because we vacuum bees out of houses. And people's like, doesn't that kill them? No, it doesn't. That's about 20,000 bees in that bucket. We take them, we shake them back in on their new hive, and they go back to work for us. This is one of my yards. If you thought about it and you're sitting there going, man, I think I can do that, become a beekeeper yourself. We've got a great organization in the Memphis area. It's the Memphis Area Beekeepers Association. We have over 500 beekeepers, and we work together. We educate. Our primary responsibility is to educate about bees and how they can be cared for, but what they do for us. We go to schools for free to talk about bees, and we go to most organizations and answer questions about bees. The big guy on the left is my brother. That's my little brother. He's about 240. I'm not. He's almost 6 feet tall. I'm not. He calls me his little brother, but I'm older than him. The other thing you can do is share what you've learned today. The best way to remember something that you've studied is to share it with someone else. So think about what was important to you that you heard today and share it with somebody else today. And again, bees are not interested in stinging us. That's one of my girls. She just came by to say hi while I was working, and I think, why not? I'll just take her picture. She stayed. She walked around on my hands. She walked on my fingers. No stings. So, questions? Anybody?
If someone is interested in becoming a beekeeper or finding out more about it, what are some of your favorite resources?
Oh my gosh. The library.
Hey, thanks.
No, in 2009, when I started this adventure, I went to the library and I got every book they had. I'm old school. I mean, I know the internet is there and it's got scats of stuff, but you got to be careful what you ask for on the internet because it will regurgitate stuff at you that you're not expecting. The library is safer. You can go and you can get any of the books. And that's what I did. Every book they had, I took out and I read. Some of the books are reference books. You can't take them out. So I read them on site. I'm a voracious reader. If any of y'all have ever read any of the Harry Potter books, the really big ones, I can do that in a day and a half. So, and what I read, I remember. So the library is one of our least used, most important resources out there. Not only are there fiction that we can enjoy ourselves with, but there's nonfiction that can educate. So go to the library. The next thing to do would be to find your local beekeeper association and just visit. You don't know what you're really in for until you are in bees. So don't go buy equipment until you know what your awe factor is. That awe factor is found by visiting someone else's bees and getting into the hives. In the Memphis Area Beekeeper Association, we have training hives where people can come in and experience bees in a safe zone. And if your awe factor is, I don't think so, don't buy the equipment because you'll end up selling it cheaper than what you bought it for. If your awe factor is like, oh my gosh, that is so cool, and you lean into it, this is for you. Then you want to talk about how much it's going to cost. On average, you're looking at about $400 to get started with a good hive setup, bee suit, smoker, and veil. It's fun. It really is fun. And I've taken adults who've never been in bees. I have taken individuals that we would typically call thugs into bees and been humbled by the questions that they've asked about this because it is so outside of their norm. They saw me in my bees and walked up and asked if they could ask questions. And I got a suit on them, got gloves on them. And we talked about bees. There are a lot of people who can be changed in their attitudes towards others and towards the world just by talking about an insect. We have a muddled up world today, but I will tell you this, when beekeepers get together, and I know this from my own experiences, you can have straight, LGBTQ, Christian, Jew, Muslim, atheist at the same table talking about bees. You can have Republicans, Libertarians, Democrats at the table talking about bees. And all of that other stuff goes out the window. And no one's trying to kill anybody. No one's trying to fight anybody. We are all focused on the bee and we are friends. And this little insect is a wonderful unifier. It's really humbling sometimes to see the changes in people's lives just because of an insect. So go to the library, join an association or visit the Beekeeper Association, ask questions. Easiest thing is just follow me on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, whatever, and ask questions there. I answer just about everything that comes to me. So those are the easies. What else? You're muted. Emily?
Oh, hi.
There you are.
Catherine asked in the chat, she said, if somebody visits, do they need to bring anything to protect themselves?
Well, when you're visiting the Beekeeper Association, we usually have a meeting in a classroom, so there's no protection necessary. All you have to do is just show up and answer questions. If you're with me, I generally have spare suits, so we can get you dressed up. Don't ever wear leggings or tight blue jeans working with bees. I worked with a young lady 2 years ago, and she showed up to get into bees, and I asked her if she would mind maybe going home and putting on some lace blue jeans. She had on yoga pants. And look, she wanted to be there, and she wasn't going home to change, so she learned a very good lesson that day. Yoga pants and bees do not mix. They can sting through those. So loose-fitting clothes, and we have jackets. We have veils. With the Beekeeper Association, somebody has almost always got a spare something that you can put on to protect yourself.
All right. And Linda Lou asked, do you have any estimates of the number of bee colonies in the wild that aren't included in your numbers of hives kept by beekeepers?
That's a good question. Tom Seeley out of Cornell is the one that I would reference back to, and we are losing colonies in the wild, not as greatly as you would expect, because, and this is boy, how do I put this? Mad Hat Nasser is a scientist up in Canada. He was the provincial secretary of agriculture, I think Ontario, and I were talking, and he was asking me about the feral colonies. Are you noticing any of those losses? And I had to think hard about it because yeah, we can beeline bees from fields and taking from flowers to see where the colonies are. We can follow them out, and we can find them in hollow trees. We can find them in people's houses. And we discussed it. I said, honestly, I'm thinking some of the lost colonies that we have aren't really lost. They've just been driven out of their hive boxes, or they've swarmed out of their hive boxes because of any number of reasons, and they have gone to people's houses. And so about 200 to 250 times a year, just in the Shelby County area, I'm pulling colonies out of houses. And if I'm doing it in this one county, look at all the colonies we have across Tennessee. There are a lot more bees in the wild than we can actually number. Just from my experience and looking at the colonies that we find in homes, there are thousands more that we don't even account for. So 2 colonies per square mile is what we're looking at right now that we have. We want more than that. I think a lot of them are out there. And let's not forget that we have other bees out there. I don't know if you've ever had miner bees in your yard, but it looks like, worms have been digging in your yard. You've got these little mounds of dirt and a little hole in a large area of your yard. And when you get out there, you see this little black fuzzy bee coming out of the ground. That's the most prolific branch of the bee kingdom, or bee family. And they're one of our first pollinators in the springs. Their stinger is so tiny it doesn't even puncture human skin. We've got over 4,000 breeds or species of bees in North America. That includes Canada. Over 4,000. That includes the leafcutter bees. It covers the alfalfa bees. It covers the blue bee, the blue bottle bees. It covers the electric blue, or the little sweat bees. Over 4,000 out there besides just the honeybee. But the cool thing about the honeybee is we've got all these little white boxes that we can count. And so we know how many of those we physically have in domestic use. We can't count all the others. Everything else we would be looking at as biomass. And that's going in and digging in the ground and pulling out the biomass, the actual things that are degrading in the dirt, to figure out how many types of insects we have in a square foot, and then estimate from the square foot per acre or hectare of how many of those are out there. So it's really hard to tell, but I think we've got more, just based off my numbers, than what's really being reported. One thing that we didn't discuss, and I know we're 5 minutes over probably, but bee venom is used in medicine. A lot of the medicines, if you actually look and see where the medicine came from, it's not just a chemical that's put together to help. It's actually from poisons from plants or venoms from insects and animals that they found work for this. For some heart cardiac problems, you might be taking digitalis. That's foxglove. It's a poisonous plant that if you eat it, can kill you. But if it's dosed and cured down to the right levels, it can regulate your heart functions. We have medicines that are made from bees. We have in the last year, I don't remember which college, but it's in Australia. Study came out that there's a component in the bee venom that destroys HERS3, the cellular structure of HERS3. HERS3 is one of the causes of breast cancer in women. The neat thing about this is the bee venom, that chemical component, does not destroy healthy cell structures. It only destroys HERS3. Bee venom has been approved for use in the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, and chronic Lyme disease. The FDA has approved it. In 2012, they found a chemical component in bee venom that destroys the cellular structure of HIV. That's pretty crazy. They're trying to synthesize this to stop the spread of AIDS. So it may hurt, it may pack a wallop when you get stung, but there are benefits in that liquid that comes out of the bee's bum. And we're talking micrograms of pain, micrograms of liquid for massive dose of pain and swelling, but it can be used to cure diseases. Crazy stuff.
All right. Well, thank you for coming out. And Mr. Glover did send us a list of bee and pollinator friendly plants that I'll be emailing out. And I'm hoping we'll be able to share this video as well on our website as well. So if you'd like to share it with your friends, keep an eye out for that to pop up on the Facebook page. And don't forget to visit the Bartlett Bee Whisperer online. Thank you so much for coming out today and hope you have a lovely weekend.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See y'all.
Goodbye.
Bye.